This morning, I want to talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness, because it is one of the greatest expressions of love. It's one of the greatest expressions of love. And I say that, I feel that, because I think it's one of the hardest expressions of love sometimes. And that's what, in a way, makes it so precious, so holy, so important. And it's why every world religion, every wisdom tradition places so much importance on forgiveness. When I was in first grade Catholic school in Baltimore, St. Mary's, I learned the Lord's Prayer. I think my first prayer that I learned. And I learned, and that line, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. I've been contemplating that a lot. I've contemplated it all my life, but this week, especially as I've been immersed in this subject, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. To me, it's a reminder that everyone makes mistakes. It's a reminder that we would like to be forgiven, and we would like to feel that peace of being forgiven. And so when we consider that, I think it makes forgiving easier, right? It softens our heart. You know, where would we be without mercy? Where would we be without the love that loves us even when we err, right? You know, the prayer to me says, God forgives you as you forgive, but I like the word love. I use the word love most of the time for God, or mother sometimes, or father. But because God is love, God is unconditional love, to me I interpret that as love flows into you as you express love in forgiveness. That's how I interpret that scripture. Love flows into you as you express love in forgiveness. So we receive and we embody love and kindness to the degree that we let it flow through us, right? It flows to us as it flows through us, right? So if our heart is blocked with resentment, right? If it's withholding love anywhere, it's like we're cutting off God, right? We're cutting off source love. We're cutting off source love. So it's just so hard to imagine a world without forgiveness. It would be unbearable. And like I said, our hearts soften, you know, when we remember how grateful we were when we were forgiven by someone we love, when we acted unconsciously. I've been looking at a lot of forgiveness quotes. I've had to edit this talk from about 50 pages down to 17. But I like this quote from Reverend Jesse Jackson. He said, if there are occasions when my grape turned into a raisin and my joy bell lost its resonance, please forgive me. Charge it to my head and not to my heart. I was speaking with Rabbi David last week, and he was telling me, because you know you all are in the period of holy days, that things are probably not going to be in place, you know, that I'm going to come in on Sunday morning, and sure enough, they weren't. But I loved what he said to me. He said, would you, and he said it with so much sincerity and humility, he said, would you forgive me in advance? And I just thought, that was such a great approach, because it softened my heart. And even though I came in here and everything was changed and I had to, you know, I had to hurry up and get it all in order this morning, and I had a little bit of anxiety and irritation, I remembered his words. And when I went back and got myself centered to come back out, I felt that. I remembered his words, and I let it all go. So I'm going to remember that. That was a teaching for me. So the work of forgiveness is a practice, right? It's a practice. It's where we clean the slate regularly, right? And it frees us from tension in the body, and it frees us from resentment in the mind. And it frees us, if it's self-forgiveness, from guilt and shame and regret. So to me, it is essential for our spiritual and our emotional and our mental health. So I told you about the experience when was it now, 3 months ago, where I got a ticket. I was driving down Ashland Street, and I was stopped at a light, and my cell phone rang, and I answered it. I only picked it up to answer it, and I put it back down, but a police officer saw me, and he stopped me, and I got a very big ticket, $265. So, so put those cell phones. I need to get a rack. I still haven't gotten one. I do not do anything with my phone in the car now. But anyway, I read a funny story, a funny joke recently that is so similar to this experience. I thought I had to share it. But I do want to say that I behaved much better than the woman in this story. So, a man was being tailgated by a stressed out woman on a busy boulevard when suddenly the light turned yellow, and even though he could have punched it, he could have gotten through the light. He was a mindful driver, so he stopped at the light. Well, the tailgating woman hit the roof. She laid on the horn and she screamed in frustration because she was in a hurry to get to her appointment, and he was slowing her down. She was still in mid-rant when she heard a tap on her window and looked up into the face of a very serious police officer. The officer ordered her to get out of her car with her hands up. He took her to the police station where she was fingerprinted, photographed, and kept in a holding cell. After a few hours, another policeman approached the cell, and he opened the door, and she was escorted back to the booking desk where the arresting officer was waiting with her personal effects. And he said, "I'm very sorry for this mistake. You see, I pulled up behind your car while you were blowing your horn, flipping off the guy in front of you, and cursing at the top of your lungs. And I noticed your license plate logo, 'Love is my religion.'" and the bumper sticker, "What would Jesus do?" And the window sticker that said, "Be the peace you wish to see." And of course, I naturally assumed you had stolen that car. I've seen drivers like that. I hope you haven't been a driver like that. So I love this story. So our work is to, live the spiritual doctrine of ahimsa, do no harm, right? Hopefully, do no harm. And as we become more mindful and more aware, it pains us if we feel like we haven't lived up to that. Hopefully, right? Regret and remorse has its place, right? Yeah, and if we don't like feeling regret or remorse, we change our behavior. So, the desire to do no harm helps curb our angry outbursts. It helps us learn compassionate communication, right? Nonviolent communication, like we just had a talk on. And it helps us to respond more consciously versus react in ways we later forget, right? But if we don't have sufficient wisdom, if we don't have sufficient understanding, if we don't have skillfulness that we've learned, that battle might still rage under the surface, right? If we carry, blame, if we carry around blame, self-blame or blame of others, and resentment and irritation just below the surface, right? It can stay trapped in us. And the Buddhists call it the mind of aversion. The mind of aversion, that we can get trapped in that. And I think we're familiar with it. It's when we're upset about something and the voice in our head tells that story over and over and over and over, and it turns that person into an absolute monster, right? And it goes on, and it can go on for years, right? So on the outer, we might be acting fairly normal, but inside, we've got this irritation, we've got this disturbance, right? We've got this anger. And the thing about anger is that it's always searching for a target to blame and to find fault with. And in the extreme, anger can become an identity. Do you know anybody that seems like they have anger as an identity? it's become such a habit where we actually like to be angry and we like to engage in blame and grudging and judging. And the thing that can happen to us when we run through our grievances over and over and over, we ruminate so many times, we tell that story so many times, it develops deep neural pathways in the brain. And so it gets harder to not do that. It takes real work to change, but we can change, right? So, many people don't like to let go of grudges, right? And that's part of their story. It's their sense of self. But that self is not our true self. It's a temporary self. It's a fictional identity that we formed that we can change. So to forgive, we have to cultivate enough mindfulness to see through our stories and take off those filtered glasses that only see our viewpoint, right? And those glasses block the frequency of the light of love, right? So we have to take those off. And it really takes self-reflection. It takes retraining. It takes reconditioning the mind and using mindfulness to see that we have a habitual story about how wronged we were. There's a wonderful book, I love it so much, by Kathleen Singh. Kathleen Singh is a Buddhist teacher. She's no longer here, but her book, The Grace in Aging, I just love this book. And she writes on forgiveness, and one of the things she says is that the mind of anger is like a dog, or the mind of aversion is like a dog holding on to its bone. It can't let go. It doesn't even want to let go. But grudges keep us in the past. That's the thing. And for all the time our mind is ruminating and resenting the past, we've missed the now. We've missed this beautiful person standing in front of us smiling. We've missed the beautiful day outside, or the just all the beauty that the world offers, because our mind is in the past. So we don't want to make anger or resentment an enemy, because it has its place. It has its place. Why would we have it if it didn't have some kind of purpose? We want to have compassion for our humanness. And also the fact that we've been wired to focus on threats, right? We've been wired to focus on threats. Early humans had to focus on the threat, right? They had to focus on the dangerous tribe coming over the hill. They had to focus on the woolly mammoth, right? So they had to stay attuned until the threat was neutralized. And so it's not only our conditioning, it's our biology. But the thing is, we're evolving, and we for the most part, we don't have threats like that, right? We're not in primitive survival. And so that kind of holding on to keeping an enemy in mind mostly has no benefit for us now in evolution. So I understand this from exploring it in myself. When someone says or does something to me that feels harmful, some thoughts or words or actions, the immediate response is often surprise or shock, and then some anger, right? And outrage. And then I notice I feel unsafe. I feel unsafe. And to me, that's kind of getting deeper to the core of what we're feeling. And that is very tribal. That is the amygdala saying, that threat has to be neutralized. The way we do that now is we put that person out of our heart or out of our life, right? Or at the very least, we're polite, but we have this bit of a wall up, right? So we do that, but say the person is your mom, like my mom. My mom was my greatest teacher, and she could trigger me like nobody else. She was my greatest triggerer. Is that a word? And, when I was younger and I would get triggered by her, say we were talking on the phone and she said something, I'd hang up and I wouldn't talk to her for a few days. But as I got older and wiser, I learned how to honor my healthy boundaries and, take space, and I reacted much less. I learned a lot about triggers. I love learning about triggers and teaching about triggers because we need that skillfulness. So I was able to bring more awareness and in the last 10 years of her life, I felt like we did so much healing. She could trigger me. I could say, I got to get something out of the car. I could take a walk, and I could come back, and I could have cleared it. That took a lifetime of work. That was really not easy, but it was worth it. And what I really feel like we kept coming back together. We had some real conflicts, but the love was stronger than the ego. That's the love won, because the love was stronger. We had so much love, and I think, knew we were doing this work together. We were here to do this work together. And so it's interesting that way. The heart wants to be close, the mind wants to be right, and the mind wants to make wrong, right? So we get to choose, where are we going to come from? We get to choose, the ego, the mind, or the heart. And the thing that I see too in the world is there's collective anger too. There's collective anger and resentment that gets built up in communities, in countries, right? And when that anger and resentment is not connected at all to the heart, wars can be carried on for centuries, right? Because we need to go deeper and get to the heart and heal and learn to live together truly as one in peace. Yeah, and we're waking up to our connectedness, and so the places there isn't peace, it's more and more painful. Is anybody else noticing that? And also we hear about it, right, a lot more. But it's like we know we are all interconnected, so where there's suffering, we suffer, right? And I think it's because we know there's a better way, right? We know there's a better way, that there is a choice for peace. And what we can do is we can practice in our own life, So our skillfulness, our antidote to stopping the passing on of hurt and suffering, lies in noticing the tendency to want to hurt those we feel have hurt us, noticing the tendency to want to hurt those who have hurt us, and work with our feelings and work with our resistance to forgiving, seeing our story of grudge that we want to hold on to, and deciding we want to be free, right? That we don't have to carry around the pain and destructive negativity anymore. There's a powerful teaching from the Buddha. A man came up to the Buddha and spit in his face. And Ananda, the Buddhist's closest disciple, was shaken by this profound disrespect, and he took off running to reprimand the spitting fellow. And Buddha called Ananda back, and he said, "We have no way of knowing what ideas this man has about me. He wasn't spitting at me, he was spitting at his own notion." I love this story because I have really recognized this lately. It's such a deep teaching that sometimes when we feel offended that we didn't get what we want, somebody did what we didn't want, or didn't do what we did want, and we turn that person into an enemy, when actually, it's the mind that's the enemy. It's the mind that is the problem, right? So the key to healing and forgiveness is we have to be willing to want peace. We say we do, but how deep is that intention for peace? Are we willing to traverse those inner battlegrounds, right? And see where we're not peaceful and be willing to re-choose to let go, I remember when my father was in his last week of life, I was in the hospice with him in the wing of the hospital. There was a hospice wing. And Dad had been in a coma for a couple days, but I could feel that he really could still hear me, and I felt he really understood. And I got the guidance to call my mom. And my mom and Dad had been divorced since I was young. They'd always been cordial, but I felt there was something unhealed. There was still some real unhealed energy between them, especially with my mom. So I called my mom and I said, "Mom, I'm here with Dad. And Dad's, gonna probably he's about to leave pretty soon. And is there anything you'd like to say?" and I had the phone on speakerphone, and I held it up to Dad's ear, and I heard Mom's voice get really soft and really tender. And she said, "Hi, Carl." She said, "You know, it's been such an amazing life, you know, and I'm so grateful for having met you and for creating such beautiful children with you. And, you know, I am just feeling a lot of love for you, and I'm going to see you on the other side." And I saw Dad's face. I mean, it totally changed. Like, his whole face relaxed, and he just looked like all this peace came over him. And I could see that forgiveness and healing had happened. It was so beautiful, so beautiful. Letting go happened. So, you know, when it comes our time to leave this world, you know, we open to what's essential, you know, and what really matters, and forgiveness arises naturally in that opening. So I do want to say that forgiveness is not to condone actions that were negative or harmful. You know, we must use discriminating wisdom. So to forgive is not to allow oneself to stay in harm's way. It is not. And we can forgive and still get ourselves out of a situation that is unhealthy or toxic in any way. And of course, for great injustices, forgiveness doesn't happen quickly. It might include a long process of grief, a long process of meeting outrage and sadness and loss. It can't be rushed. It's a process that's repeated over and over and over in our heart, where we honor the grief. So this talk wouldn't be complete without addressing self-forgiveness. As I got into writing a bit about that, I realized that should be a whole talk. But I do want to say some things about it. I found a great book in the library, Failures of Forgiveness, really good book on forgiveness by Maisha Cherry. And she writes that part of self-forgiveness needs to include a sincere change of heart. And that change includes taking responsibility, which means acknowledging our wrongdoings and shortcomings. And she talks about moral regret and how the feelings of regret and remorse have purpose. I mean, think about it. That's how we learn. The feelings of regret and remorse have purpose, and the purpose is not to make us suffer, okay? The purpose is that we learn from the past. We learn from the past, we respond to it, and we become a better person as a result. There's a quote by Sri Aurobindo that I have loved for so long. I have it in the liner notes for one of my CDs. And it says, "There are no sins, no errors, only countless mishaps. Countless mishaps that compel us to explore the full expanse of our kingdom, to embrace everything in order to heal everything." So much love in that. So, you know, how can we learn without making mistakes? You know, that's why I think we have forgiveness in this realm. Because we're all learning. We're children of God, children of love, right? And we make mistakes, right? Can we give ourselves the love that the unconditionally loving mother that we sang about is always holding us in? So this is how we can meet that remorse and that regret and find healing. It's important that we do. It's important that we do. You know, as we find the lessons in our mistakes, we do better. And then that allows us to forgive and love ourselves again and again, right? So forgiveness is a tender work. It's a tender subject. I've tried to write this talk. I don't know. I've worked on it for a couple months now. I finally am giving you this talk. There's so much to this subject. But when we let go of the past, when we let go of the story, when we let go of the stress and the unease, awakening occurs. Awakening occurs through our releasing. Another beautiful quote, one of my favorite quotes is, "If you let go a little, you'll have a little happiness. If you let go a lot, you'll have a lot of happiness. If you let go completely, you will be free. You will be free. So forgiveness is the greatest act of love. It is the ultimate peacemaker. Peacemaker. And so I wish for you. I wish for myself. I wish for all your relations, your family. I wish for our community. I wish for the countries in this world. I wish for the earth herself. I wish forgiveness. I wish peace. I wish healing on us all so that we may be free from suffering. May it be, and so it is. Thank you all.